It's like death of the father. Oh, but he's also the king. Oh, and he's marrying your mother's marrying your uncle. Oh,
here I go. Show him your Hamlet, kid. Hey, let's sneak off to the East Wing. That's where all the good stuff goes down in the East Wing.
It's all winning for me, baby. I've got more. Isn't that insane?
Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you're crazy. Maybe we're crazy.
Previously on Hamlet. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh, God. God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on't, oh, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed, things rank and gross in nature. Possess it merely, that it should come to this. But 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion, to a satyr, so loving to my mother, that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly, heaven and earth. Must I remember why she would hang on him, as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month. Let me not think on't. Frailty, thy name is woman. A little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why she, even she, oh God, a beast that once discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules within a month. Ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Oh, most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue.
Excellent. Excellent.
There you go. That's one way to do it.
Oh, that was awesome.
Possibly.
That was great. I loved it. It's a soliloquy that I've played around with myself for it feels like quite some time now. So I love just hearing your take, your ear. But I think beyond my own sort of exploration, it's one of the great things about it is, of course, it's Hamlet's intro. And it sets up, even though we've already had, Act 1, Scene 1. We've already had Act 1, Scene 2. Oh, well, actually, this is Act 1, Scene 2, sorry. We've already had Act 1, Scene 1. We've already set up like, okay, there's a ghost and there's something brewing, and Hamlet's friend Horatio is there to witness something, and something is brewing, but we really don't know what the play is about.
Good point.
And then here it is.
That's great. You're right. This lays it out for us.
It's pretty in beautiful poetry. It lays out Hamlet's, infinite, unsolvable, in a sense, problem. Beyond finding out he has to, the ghost. This is just before the events of Act 1, of Scene 1 affect Scene 2. Before Hamlet connects, he is already miserable, wants to die, and is rushing about in his mind, with lots of reversals, or what's the better term that you have used in the past?
Those kind of interruptions of his own mind.
Interruptions, and also a bit of
contradiction. The antithesis.
Antithesis. Thank you. Antithesis.
Sure, yeah.
Hyperion to a satyr.
Yeah.
Hyperion to a satyr.
Yeah.
Right. I to Hercules. Yes.
Great.
Great.
And then even setting up that stuff of 2 months, 1 month, little month, within a month, like keeping keeping us as an audience constantly off guard, keeping us guessing and not settled. I think, it's funny, one of the big mistakes I made when I played this the first time, which I see a lot of first time Hamlets make, is they launch into this first speech. And one is because you've rehearsed it for so long and thought about it. You cannot wait to do that first soliloquy. And you launch into it with all of this kind of anger and spite and piss and vinegar. But I think for Hamlet, even though this is kind of his beginning, for him, the character, it feels like an end for him. It feels like I've got nowhere to go, nowhere to turn, bite my tongue, right? Break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. I wish I could just die and melt away. There's this finality, kind of like I'm trapped, I've got nowhere to go. When in fact, in the play, he's about to get launched into his journey. So it's really, but as an actor, it's hard to make that distinction in your mind of, you have to have the mindset of, I've got nowhere to go, rather than the actor thinking, here we go, I've got 3 hours to play Hamlet. It's
right.
It
Can't wait to battle the
time.
Airties at the end. Like, no.
Yes. That's the mistake I made as a 25-year-old, going, here I go, show him your Hamlet, kid. And it's not the right approach.
I think that was the original text. Here I go, show us your Hamlet, kid. I'm going to Hamlet on. Oh, boy. I think that was the Jude Law one. Sorry, Jude Law.
Oh, it was. Yep.
One thing that can't be taken for granted is that Hamlet is reciting to himself, talking to the audience, and explaining to him an extremely complex problem that is destroying him. Not only it's the death of the king of their land, it's the death of his father, who happens to be the king of his land, and this out of nowhere marriage to his uncle, who's no more like his father than, he to Hercules, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like death of the father. Oh, but he's also the king. Oh, and he's marrying, your mother's marrying your uncle. Oh, so he's got a triple whammy of just like misery. So you can't take that for granted, how crippled he is, and how much the triple smack has destroyed him. So right, in ending, he is dead.
Yeah, I love that you say, yes, right. I love that you say crippled, because people love to ask this question throughout the play. Why does he wait so long? Why does it take him so long? Why the delay, right? Why does Hamlet? I think they underestimate what this has done to him.
Yeah.
Not only those three things you just said, but a ghost that he thinks might be the devil is telling him to kill a king. You don't just jump and do that. You don't just go do that. So people who ask why the delay, I think they're underestimating what you just spoke about.
Exactly. And underestimating the weirdness and what normally would be the impossibility of seeing a ghost. So you've got Hamlet completely crippled. And then, right, he might be the devil. We don't know what this ghost is. And all of a sudden, a spirit is telling him, hey, guess what? I'm your father, but sort of the spirit of, but not really. I find you apt. So therefore, kill your uncle because he killed me. Thanks. And so, right. If this was, say, just a bubblegum action movie, then Stallone or whoever would get on the truck. I don't know why a truck, but he's on a truck.
Oh, it would be a truck.
And he's on his way to, destroy, but Hamlet is like dead. So when you're dead, you're dead. Yeah. He is not existing. And he wants, and since he's still technically alive, he wants to be dead. All of a sudden, a spirit from the netherworld, which he's never experienced in his entire life, says, guess
Named
what?
Horatio. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, well, he's the devil's minion.
But you're right.
It's like, of course he takes his time, because he's like, what the? He's like, hey, I was dead. Now a spirit that I've never experienced in my life, who I don't know where it's from, is telling me this insane information. Am I to believe the spirit?
Right.
That my uncle was complicit. It might connect a few dots, and also I'm supposed to kill this guy. I'm not really good at killing kings.
That's exactly
Terrible
right.
at it.
That's right. He's more of a thinker than, but yeah, it's a king. We don't forget it's a king. What was that? It's a great quote, and I think it's George Bernard Shaw when he was asked if you had to put Hamlet on a postcard, right? What is Hamlet about in one sentence, basically? What is it about? And George Bernard Shaw's reply was, it's about a man who has to kill a king. I don't think we can. I mean, I think that is kind of simplifying it, but I think the point is, don't underestimate the task at hand, and that it is a king.
It's two things. It's don't underestimate the task at hand, but don't also underestimate the person who has tasked with the task.
That's exactly right.
Because it's not Horatio who would just get it over with right that second because he's a scumbag. Sorry, Horatio. No, not sorry. Not sorry. Again, I'm not a serial killer. Anyway,
not yet.
Not yet. I know. Don't show this
yeah,
in court.
you're right. The person who's been tasked with it, you're exactly right. So I think that's And then once he does his little test and gets the answer that he thinks is clear, his behavior changes and it goes, mother killed Polonius. Spoiler alert. Off to England, kills Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, comes back. I mean, things change. So. And we're getting ahead of ourselves once again, but yes, that's exactly right. I get annoyed when people talk about why did he delay? You're not reading the play if you're asking that question.
Yeah, it's all there in the text about why he quote unquote goes mad or feigns madness, because he's not as mad as people think he is, but he is going a little crazy, because so would anyone.
Yes, so would anyone. People, come on. The power of grief, the power of your entire world being turned upside down and shattered in pieces, and the difficulty of trying to put it back together. Who is my friend? Who is not my friend? Ophelia seemingly turns on him.
Yeah.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, that weird thing. Like, yes, his world is shattered, man.
Increasingly so, because increasingly he feels even further alone than he was before, because like, oh, friends, oh, you're not really my friends. And Horatio, you're here for my what did he say? Oh, for my father's funeral? No, you're here for my mother's wedding. Please.
Right.
Right.
So, and then Ophelia in that conversation, oh, you're setting me up. This whole thing is a setup in the nunnery scene. And he reacts. Yes, people say, oh, he treats her so badly. Yeah, he reacts. He says a bunch of stuff, but what's the situation he's in? Are you kidding me with this?
Yeah.
Yes, let's cut the guy a little slack.
And leave it to, and as we're going to see as we begin Act 1, Scene 3, the Shakespeare stacks the odds even further against Hamlet. Which brings up a lot of questions, which I'm looking forward to going over with you.
Let's get into this discussion, because I've got a lot of questions for you and how you see this. And so where should we start?
Well, I think we should start by the fact that the previous scene, Act 1, Scene 2, ends with Hamlet getting a little excited, being told of the ghost, actually experiencing the ghost. No,
he hasn't seen. No, we're not there. He's been told of it.
He's been told of the ghost, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm awake now. This is interesting. I might live a little bit and find out what's this about.
I have a mission or a journey or a reason." Yeah, right.
Sit still, my soul. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth overwhelm them to men's eyes. So he's intrigued. He's intrigued. And what the audience, the reader has experienced, but particularly the audience, ghosty Hamlet, I'm miserable, the king and queen to like, chill out, dude. And then Hamlet's like, I don't know, ghost, it sounds kind of cool. I'm gonna get into this stuff. So things are looking up. Yeah. But of course, Shakespeare's like, no, this is a tragedy, man. And it's a tragedy for a reason. Now I'm going to just double down on some crap I'm going to pour on Hamlet.
I'm going to make sure it's a tragedy. I my particular taste, and you don't see this done often anymore, is that the last line of one scene should be butted right up against the first line of the next scene. So previous scene, next scene, those two lines should be right together. I think this is a great even if the actors in those scenes, even if they're not even in the same kind of world at the moment, kind of are on stage for a moment together. I think this is one of those great moments. I think at the end of Act 1, Scene 3, it's another great moment to do it. So imagine Hamlet on stage, all by himself, saying, "Till then sit still, my soul, foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes." And then you have Laertes kind of rushing on, who's kind of the antithesis to Hamlet, maybe even Ophelia running in front of Hamlet. This juxtaposition between these two scenes, I think there's a great opportunity there. If you don't do a lights down, play some music, shuffle this set off, shuffle another set on, I think you lose something in that.
Right. Yeah. Well, pacing is a key to this play, and certainly key to going scene by scene as well. But sadly, not this Zoom chat. So pacing is whatever we feel like it. So in your face, never watching.
Pacing has never been mine and Paul's strong point. We tend to just go on and on. It's funny because I've been listening to some people talk about this play. I'll like seek out any kind of podcast or anything, and they all say, well, it's a 4+ hour play. You can't put time on a play. It depends on how you perform it. What do you mean it's a 4+ hour play? If you're doing it slow, if you're trying to make it a 4-hour play, sure. But if you've got it at tempo and you pick it up, it can be a 3-hour play, easily a 3-hour play. So these people who love to say it's so long that's because you've seen long, drawn out productions of it. I don't think it's intended to be 4.5 hours.
Also, I hate the idea that to characterize Hamlet as just, it's a long play. Like, wow, I guess that's all it is. I guess it's just long and that's it. It's not, like, hey, what about what's in the play? And
right.
Let's talk about that. If all you're thinking is running time, then you haven't read the play.
That's right. And you're not focused on what's in it or the story of it. You're right. That's really it. Great. So we go from first scene, ghost scene, kind of scary. Second scene, kind of a little more public, a little more the official business, and then the suspense of Horatio and the guards. And now we're getting kind of what I feel like is the first kind of domestic scene, I guess I would call it, of seeing a family. And again, I will point out this scene ends up at its best. This scene is of 3 people because 3s just work better. Ends up being the family of 3. In a play that I think the more I read it, the more I get older and have kids, that says a lot about families breaking apart and the structure of family. And we're going to see, depending on how you play it, possibly a family structure that's quite good. We don't know where the mother is, but the way the father treats his son, he's more harsh on Ophelia, but you can take that in a way where he's trying to be protective. A brother and sister who communicate well, could be. You could see that in this scene.
Yeah. What's curious too is, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, yeah, go ahead.
It's basically the scene begins with Laertes basically giving info to the audience, like, hey, this is what's happening. My necessaries are embarked, farewell, and sister, as the winds give benefit and convey, is assistant, do not sleep, but let me hear from you. So basically, just laying it out like, you're my sister, I'm a dude, I'm splitting, and you're like, okay. And then she's like, do you doubt that? Great. And then immediately he's like, digging in on Hamlet. Like, what the hell, I know. So
does this happen in your mind? Last time we saw Laertes and Polonius, they were asking permission of the king to go back to France. The king said yes. So this, in your mind, happens minutes later, right? This is not the next day. This is pretty close to, I don't know. It's hard to talk about time, but it's all happening pretty close together.
I would think so. If not minutes, at least, I don't know, an hour, right. At most an hour, something pretty short. And, but yet what transpires is it's an interesting scene because you've got 2 people saying the same thing. Stay the fuck away from Hamlet,
Yeah.
Excuse my Swedish, but it didn't occur to me until today. I mean, I've seen Hamlet. We've seen Hamlet a bunch of times and I've read it and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, wow, Laertes. I mean, who is Laertes? That he, I mean, he's got this crazy wisdom to know that, and to know that Hamlet, she should stay away from him, and that it's better for all. Which brings up, of course, another question is why? Is it because his station or because of who he is specifically? Polonius makes it further clear. We'll get to that, but it says here, for Hamlet and the. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, necessary to embark. You're right. It lays out some good stuff here. Sister, Laertes, Ophelia's sister. We get that relationship. I'm going to head out. Let me hear from you. Do you doubt that? Okay. And what's next?
Oh, for Hamlet. It's like Hamlet is the impediment in their. Hamlet is like the family blocker. And he is, because basically, if not for Hamlet, they're all dead. Sorry, spoiler alert. He kills all of them. So tough stuff here. And Laertes, even though he's like a rogue gent, is strangely has some of his father's wisdom. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
We have an opportunity to see that Laertes is his father's son. You know what I mean? Like, and we get to see an opportunity for that relationship, that like father like son. We also, I love what you pointed out, like the kind of wisdom. Like, I know things happen to Hamlet and that's what causes him to react the way he does to Ophelia, but we don't get to see if Laertes was right in the things he says, or if Polonius was right. We don't get a chance to see if that really would have happened, if Hamlet would have gone on and had to turn his back on Ophelia because of his duties as the prince and all that kind of stuff. We don't get to see that. But from my point of view, I don't know. I keep reading it as pretty good advice. Maybe the way he delivers it, but I think it's good. It's like, be careful. Be careful is what he's telling his sister.
The conundrum, among many things, is that here you have the hand to the king basically saying to his daughter, well, the prince, because at this point Hamlet is the prince of Denmark, he's going to be, he's got some stuff to do, and because of his station he may be forced to marry someone else, and I don't want you to get hurt, etc., part of his duty. But then he's also hand to the king. Makes me think, couldn't he just said, hey king, my daughter and your son, or your adopted son, I don't know, pretty good match, don't you think?
Right. I guess that's a question I have later too that I wrote down. Like, why would Polonius not want this? And I guess we will get there. Will get there. But why would he not want this? Wouldn't it just elevate his own status? I don't know.
But yeah, but at the same time, the thought crosses me, I think for international reasons, i.e. Henry V and his marriage, so sometimes marriage as duty for treaties and compliance or what have you. So it could be that.
So then Polonius's motive for telling Ophelia to stay away would be truly as a father to a daughter, so the daughter doesn't get her heart broken, which makes me like Polonius even more, which makes him sound like a caring father, where we don't usually see that played.
Right. It's why I hate when, not to name names, but productions portray Polonius as serious as a heart attack and harsh as can be to his daughter.
Right, without any noticeable, without any apparent motive, like true motive, like why are you acting this way toward her? But if you come at it from a fatherly, even if you said it a little too harshly or used the wrong words, but you come at it as, I don't want my daughter to get hurt because I know how these political things go. That's a real human. That's a father-daughter relationship. That's something that gives me respect for this guy that I like. And you're right, we rarely see it.
We really see that, and Laertes too. I mean, Laertes is imparting the same wisdom, and their methods may be different, but the idea, Laertes is saying the same thing. I mean, he says, but the thing is,
let's go through that. Yeah, go ahead and start there at Laertes' line. Let's go through it.
Well, he goes, for Hamlet in the trifling of his favor, hold it a fashion and a toy in blood, a violet in the youth of primy nature, forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, perfume and supplement suppliance of a minute to no more. So it's interesting that Laertes, he's not at this point talking about duty or the nature of Hamlet's stature. He's now talking just about youth.
Right.
Fickle youth, which makes me wonder the difference in age of Hamlet and Laertes.
Yeah, that's another thing. We talk about time, age goes in that as well. We're going to find out at the end of the play that Hamlet is 30 years old. Doesn't sound like he's talking about a 30-year-old. Sounds like he's talking about a 17 or 18-year-old.
Yes. That's why I wonder if the objection is personal or is it professional? And makes me wonder the history of Laertes and Hamlet. How well do they know each other? We've talked about that before.
That's great, Paul. And I think if you're about to play these roles or you're about to direct this play, one of the keys in doing this play is developing those ideas, developing those relationships, what were before all of this happened. That's something that people just studying the play, that scholars don't discuss because they don't really need to connect those dots. But we as actors and directors and putting the play on and putting the shoes on, we need to know, what was my relationship with this person before my father died? I think that's a great question.
Right, because it's one thing, as we'll see, Polonius to mention Hamlet as young, but for Laertes to say, to be so quick with forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting. Is it personal, or does he feel like it's the nature of princes to spread their love around, not necessarily be devoted to one? It's right. It's one of those cases as an actor to ask, as you often do, ask the questions. You may not know the answer, you may never get to the answer, but just keep asking those questions. Reminds me again of our beloved Eden, who always encouraged questions as we approach a character, not answers, questions.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah. Why is he, and what does he know? How well does he know Hamlet? You got to imagine that they grew up around each other. If Polonius was the hand to the king of King Hamlet that has been there for all this time, that knew Hamlet when he was young. So you have to think that Laertes knows Hamlet. What that is, that's for a rehearsal room to explore. That's for actors to explore. The answers lie in the actors who play the roles. But that's the opportunity in this play. That's the opportunity in Shakespeare. It not only asks you what you think, but requires your opinion of it. Love it.
Absolutely.
And then the great kind of back and forth, which Shakespeare does this a lot. It's one line, but it could be, it's three kind of lines, but it could be one line, no more, but so think it no more, could all be right on a line.
Oh, that's great. Because they're all interrupted lines. And the Laertes is 100%, 100% on this, because he goes on a long soliloquy about that very subject.
Right, right. Think it no more. For nature crescent does not grow alone in thews and bulk, but as this temple waxes, the inward service of the mind and soul grows wide withal. I have to say, I think that's a line that I don't think I've ever been in a production where they actually kept that line. They usually keep think it no more, and then perhaps he loves you now. They cut straight there. But I love that line, right? That line that's saying like the whole thing, as you grow, it's not just your body and your mind. It all grows together. It all becomes mature at the same time. And he uses words like temple and service, which to me are kind of remind me of kind of like church service and church temple. And as we know, Ophelia later is going to refer to the, what is it? The, what does she call him? The preacher, do not, hold on, let me get this line right. Do not preach to me. She's going to throw church back in his face. Where does she say that? I feel like, do
not as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven.
Yes. So he's using these church terms, and she's going to say ungracious pastors, steep and thorny way to heaven. Kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I love also
So
that basically that Laertes of all people, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
is imparting such a profound note of wisdom that as our bodies, as this temple waxes, as our body gets older, the mind, and by older it dies because we grow older and the body slowly, but the mind, so the body withers, but the mind grows wider,
yeah.
and speaking of maturity, so it's a lot in a very small amount of lines, and it's incredible that it comes from Laertes, not Polonius, Laertes.
Yeah, that's great. I think building that character of Laertes, you have to look at these few lines where he's talking to his sister. I think we really see who that later that Laertes is fueled by so many other things. This is where we get to really see that Laertes. Even before his father comes in, I even think his conversation with Ophelia is as close as you get to the real Laertes, I think.
Yes. Continue, Ty. So perhaps he loves you now.
Mm-hmm. And now no soil nor caudle doth besmirch the virtue of his will. Meaning, right now he believes he loves you. He hasn't been affected by all these other things. It hasn't been dirtied or soiled. Like, he believes he loves you. But you must fear his greatness weighed, his will is not his own, for he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the sanity and health of his whole state. It's great, clear, good advice. I think. What do you think of that? It sounds a very well thought out argument.
Well, the thing that confuses me though is that he goes from saying, well, he's young and fickle, to saying, well, actually, because of his duty to the state, he's subject to that, and your love may not be part of that. So he's kind of, I wonder if it's both personal, and that it's business and the fact of Hamlet's age, or is it all business and he's just trying to fluff it up a bit, I guess.
Yeah, to me it sounds like he's talking kind of about two different things. He's saying right now Hamlet believes he loves you, but very soon he's going to have to make decisions in the public eye. Very soon he's going to have to live up to who he is, and all of that's going to change. All his decision making is going to get soiled. He uses the word soil later on. So I think maybe that's what Laertes is doing. He's looking down the road saying he may believe he loves you now because he's young, but in the life of a prince and possibly a king, it's going to get dirty and you need to fear it. I think, maybe I'm giving Laertes too much credit, but I do.
No, that sounds right by me.
Yeah. And I think maybe, listen, also, I'll be honest, part of me reading this now, I can't help but be in part reaction to what I think I don't like in productions that I've seen, where I don't like the kind of overbearing older brother saying, giving advice to his sister about staying away from boys. I think there's a better quality to Laertes than we're used to seeing, I think. And maybe I'm looking for that, but I think it's on the page.
What's interesting is that I'm guessing that maybe some directors and producers read that and say, well, I don't want Laertes stepping up Polonius's toes because we've got two guys imparting wisdom. So let's just cut out the fat of Laertes and just make him the rogueling, hustling, don't do, blah, 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 and I'm gone. As opposed to, I'm actually a sensitive and caring brother, and I had a foresight to see something. Now which makes you wonder, well, why did Shakespeare have it? Why? He included it. This is his work. He included having two different people of the same family saying essentially the same thing in different ways. Now that's important.
That's a good point. I don't know.
Does one make the other redundant? I don't think so, because it's two different voices and they exemplify two different characters. I think that's the real purpose.
Yes. And I think what you said early on before we started tonight was you said Shakespeare's about to really stack the odds against Hamlet. You got one thing of a brother saying, careful, and then you have a father going, "You shall not." Right? It's like really stacking the cards against him. So by the time we get to nunnery, it can only go south.
Exactly. So perhaps Shakespeare's intention with Laertes' soliloquy is sort of a warm up to what Polonius is going to dump on her to a certain extent.
Yes.
Yeah. But it denotes a lot about his character that I've never seen in any production before.
No, I haven't either. And again, let me ask you, Paul: is it? Would Laertes say this? My question was, would he say this about any boy that she was dating? But no, because he makes a point talking about his responsibility to the state. But again, why would Laertes? Is it simply, and maybe I don't mean simply as a bad way, that he doesn't want his sister to have a broken heart? Because would you not want your sister to be part of the royal family? Right? Is he just protecting her?
I think he's protecting her because I think he and Polonius do not believe that Ophelia will ever be part of the royal family. Because one thing that is not considered is that we assume Polonius, Laertes, and Ophelia are part of a higher class because they're but not necessarily so. They are servants to royalty. They themselves are not royalty.
Right.
So,
right.
The tendency with royalty is royalty marries royalty. So when kings, as with Henry V, you conquer France, you get to marry the queen or the princess or what have you. Mm-hmm. So I think both Laertes and Polonius are wise enough to know that this ain't going to happen. We'd love for you to marry the king, but that just ain't the way it works.
Okay. Right.
Right. So that's why I'm kind of answering my own question as well, because I always wondered since I was a teenager, like, what the hell? Ophelia, Hamlet, what's the problem?
No, you would think Ophelia's dad would be like, yeah, like, why don't you go sit next to Hamlet? Why don't you go talk to Hamlet? Yeah, you could be the queen one day. Yeah,
exactly. But royalty is a lot different than the general public. General public, if he was a wealthy person, then you're right. But this is a prince of Denmark.
That's interesting. I've been listening to this podcast on Princess Diana. Wow, it's really interesting. All of how she got roped into that, and from the beginning, she was miserable. Matter of fact, like the night before the wedding, like she knew she wanted to call it off. Like, yeah, it's there are so much pomp and circumstance that you don't want to get involved in, and it's not about love. Yeah,
really, it's hard. It's truly, truly heartbreaking when I think about it.
Yeah, it really is. Yes, so maybe that's when you say it like that, it's heartbreaking, and you look at your daughter and you go, "Hey, I've seen this happen before. Don't do this."
And on top of the fact that it's just not possible, Diana came from some sort of royalty herself.
She did. That's true.
Yeah. So it's just the king hand's daughter. It's like, he married her. Ophelia would not be considered a catch in royalty terms. Sad to say, as hot as Ophelia was, all you Ophelia lovers out there. It's.
Yep, I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good point. Depends on the state. Oh, and therefore must choose where are we at here?
Okay, so on the states, and therefore must his choice be circumscribed unto the voice and yielding of that body, the body being the state. He has to yield to the states, whereof he is the head. Then if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it. Poorly putting that portion in, but get the point is that I think you've now made it clear for me that it's the state. That's the whole thing. It's not personal. It's I think they don't mind if Hamlet fools around and has some girls here and there, but their daughter, it's because he's a prince and his age, which is not as young as, let's say, Ophelia per se. It'd be a wasted. It's funny, it'd be a wasted effort in the long term, and so. But it's weird that
he's saying be careful. He's saying fear it, be careful, and also I think Laertes, we're going to see in this speech, is more like, don't go too far. You can be friendly with him and see him, but don't open your legs to him. Don't go too far. Don't get involved physically or emotionally. Whereas Polonius says, you shall not ever see him again.
I
It's a
know.
little bit harsher. Hey, you know what struck me right now is that later we're going to talk a little bit about succession and about the politics of who gets to be king. And is Hamlet really worried about not being king now that Claudius is king? Because he very rarely brings it up. But Laertes seems to say here, unto the voice and yielding of that body, whereof he is the head. So Laertes is already saying, because in the previous scene, Claudius said, next to our throne, right? It will be Hamlet. Hamlet is next in line for the throne. So Laertes is already saying, Hamlet will be king next. Claudius just said he's going to be king. He's going to be king next. But no one's really discussing as far as if Hamlet really should be king right now, right? If they're, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, if Claudius became king because his advisors elected him, or there was an election, which Hamlet says he popped between the election and my hopes. Laertes doesn't seem to think if he gets elected, Hamlet will be the head of the state. He's already saying Hamlet's going to be the head of the state. So again, the politics in here, I don't know what they are. I don't know what the rules are in the politics. Yeah, and this is the first we kind of hear of it.
It's funny. I never even considered the politics with that. But that's a good point, though. Another thing that strikes me that adds an unspoken of color to this scene. Both Laertes and Polonius are very quick to say, stay away from this guy. And Polonius is like, permanently, because believe me, it's going to get you hurt. Hey, how about consideration for the fact that Hamlet just lost his father and his mother has married his uncle and he's miserable? There's no I'm now going to be Team Hamlet for the moment. There's no consideration for Hamlet's feelings, because if Ophelia is telling them, or if they discover that Hamlet and Ophelia are having fun, why not to let them have their fun? Why does it have to stop now? Why?
That's a very good point. And we were all witness. I mean, it says Laertes and Polonius were there, but I think Ophelia was there as well. In the previous scene, Hamlet goes on this speech about seems, madam, nay it is, I know not seems, 'tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath. He gives a speech about, I'm hurting. And then in the next scene, they're like, don't hang out with that guy.
It's like, right, none. It's incredibly, it's something I've never thought about until today, that I thought, wow, why does it have to happen now? Why, it's this, how long have they been seeing each other? How long has it been discovered? And why so suspicious and having it stop immediately? This poor man is gone through hell. It's interesting that, neither of them consider that factor, because, and I'm just going to add on top of it, not too helpful to the actor, but this is Great Britain. I'm sorry. This is, Great Britain at the time, but also Denmark, or whenever. It's the 16th or 16th or 17th century.
Right.
So women were not, of course, thought much of.
Right. Well, I mean, this character couldn't even be played by a woman. Right.
Right. So it's so too that they would. The only thing that makes sense to me is like, oh, you like something? Well, don't do it because you're just a woman. So please,
right.
Hamlet can have his.
It's the first case of mansplaining, like 420 years ago.
Shakespeare would not survive the Me Too movement. No, he would be in trouble.
No. It's true.
But yes, it's both of them. I think it does help the actor in the sense that how those characters truly perceive women, in that time. I mean, of course, you could change the time, etc., but at least as written in the original text, the way Shakespeare intended. at least.
Yeah, if you're looking at how many lines the men have in the scene and how many lines the women have in this scene, it's obvious. Yeah.
Right.
So can you let's keep
Yes.
going here. So maybe you can pick it up after whereof he is the head, and then you can pick it up from there and just kind of keep going as long as you want.
Okay. Then, if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it, as he is in his particular act in place, may give his saying deed, which is no further than the main voice of Denmark goes withal.
Yeah.
So, he's basically saying, yeah, he's going to do stuff for you. And he's not going to, his love for you is real and he may act upon so. But again, this is all just temporary stuff. This is
right.
That then weigh what loss your honor may sustain if with too credent ear you list his songs, or lose your heart or your chaste treasure open to his unmastered importunity. So yeah.
Love that. Yeah, it's a good point. He's like, listen, if you fall for him and do whatever he wants and sleep with him and get wooed by him, but then the state of Denmark does not approve of you, think of what you will lose, right? What you will lose in that process. What will you, of course, speaking in 1603, what will you then have to offer the next man if you gave it all to this guy?
Yeah, that's a good point. And they are, though maybe not in the best fashion I may call it, saying it in the best
can't
manner.
Help yourself. I know.
I can't help myself. Sorry. Fear it, Ophelia, fear it, my dear sister, and keep you in the rear of your affection, out of the shot and danger of desire. I mean, gosh, this man is so forthright and clear in his points. And, I'm surprised Ophelia, when Polonius finally, goes off on her, she's like, enough already. I get it. Jeez.
Don't you just love that line? I love that line. And keep you in the rear of your affection.
Yes.
Out of the shot and danger of desire. Goodness gracious.
It's very pretentious of Laertes, but, and again.
Yeah, but the way he puts it, man, shot in danger of your desire. God, so good.
The chariot maid is prodigal enough if she unmasks your beauty to the moon. Virtue itself scapes not calamitous strokes. I mean, it's like he's just beating the crap out of her with words, with love, and this is before Polonius even arrives. The canker galls the infants of the spring too oft before their buttons be disclosed. And in the morn and liquid dew of youth, contagious blasphements are most intimate. Be wary then. Best safety lies in fear. Youth to itself rebels, though none else near. It's almost like a scene ending. But yes, he's like,
it is like a scene because it's a rhyming couplet, right? It feels like a scene ending.
So I look at that and I think, my God, Shakespeare writes that and says, oh no, I've got more.
And that's what's so great is reading it like that, reading it this slow and taking a look at it. I'm like, that speech is incredible. But that's not the best speech in the play. That's not even the best speech in the scene.
I know. Isn't that insane?
The most famous speech. I know. So in this, be wary that best safety lies in fear. I mean, he's really I feel like he's upping the ante with his speech. It's almost like he's trying harder and harder to change her facial expression. Youth to itself rebels, though none else near. So what I get from that line is that he's saying youth just has this need to rebel. And if there's nothing else to rebel around, it will rebel against itself.
It also
in the way of not protecting itself. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think it also possibly could mean that youth has a rebellion that adults don't have. They have a natural contrarian nature that changes. It could mean that.
Oh yeah, right.
None else, none being, men of old, men of middle age.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I see what you mean. Though none else near. Yeah, great line. Just a great, really, really great. Okay, now, yeah, go read this next Ophelia speech and then tell me what you're feeling and what you're, again, I always, the answers lie in the actor who plays it. And this is a speech that I've seen played a few different ways, but if you would read it and give me your take on it.
Okay. I'll read it silently. No, I
Okay,
shall
great.
I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart. But, my good brother, do not, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, whiles, like a puffed and reckless libertine, himself the primrose path of dalliance treads and recks not his own reed. So playful and so poignant, because she's like, dude, I know you. Come on. Do unto others. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think playful is great. Also, just point out for people who are performing this or directing this, it's only two sentences. It's only two thoughts. It is, yes, I will remember what you said, and don't be a hypocrite. There's no time for big pauses in there. There's no time for to break that up with action. It's, you got to follow the thought in that. I'm not saying go quickly, but you have to know where the end of that line is, and you got to drive your way all the way through it. And when you do, it becomes clear what she's saying. A lot of times we see people stop for no reason at all, because they're adding something to it. But that whole speech is just two thoughts. That's really what it is. I like to think too that first reaction, I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart, I'd like to think that's sincere.
I
You
think
see
so
people,
too.
yeah, you see people throw it away like, ooh, like sarcasm, like, oh yeah, sure, I'll remember. But I would love for her to look at her brother and say, look, I get what you're saying, and I appreciate it, and I will remember it. But don't you, blah, 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 blah. I like that, rather than her just dismiss what he's saying.
Yeah, it's one of the few times in the play that a woman gets to, give it back to a man.
Yes. Yeah.
But yes, I think there's an urgency to possibly all the text in Hamlet, and as you mentioned, the clarity of that speech is missed if you put the pauses in. It's
Yes.
the answers lie in the text in terms of the meter of your speech, and if you run it through, maybe you give one line ending if you like. But
Sure.
Otherwise, if you run it straight through, then the clarity becomes more clear.
I totally agree. And I think urgency is something that I think the text asks of us, but I don't think we see it very often. I think this play demands urgency, and there's a muscularity and there's a drive to this play, which we don't see. We just see people slow it down and meander about with this play. But I'm going to keep my eye out and ear out for more of that urgency. And I think we're going to see it in every scene.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Laertes' response, of course, is avoiding that. Like, oh, he says something interesting. He says, oh, fear me not. So just kind of like, yeah, okay, I get it, whatever. You got me. But he says, I stay too long, but here my father comes. Doesn't say our father, my father. What's up with that?
That is interesting. Yeah. What is up with that? But here my father comes. Huh. I don't know. Also, again, this is me being sentimental, and this is me being a father and missing my father and all those things. I see this played a lot like, oh boy, here comes my father, eye roll, because of the line, I stay too long. But the next line is, a double blessing is a double grace. Occasion smiles upon a second leave. What does that mean to you?
Well, on the surface, it means here my father comes again. He's going to give me some words of wisdom, and I'm going to because I already said goodbye to him. So this is my second time saying goodbye.
Okay, right. So you do have that, because that's what I hear too. I hear that we said goodbye earlier, right? A double blessing is a double. So I'm going to get blessed again. But he says occasion smiles upon a second leave. I just can't help it. That sounds thankful. It sounds, I know I see people do the eye roll thing here, but it just, I don't know. I can't help but that line. I think because people say I stay too long, meaning like, oh no, here comes my father. But I feel like he says I stay too long before he even sees Polonius coming. But here my father comes. A double blessing is a double grace. I don't know. I would like to see at least tried in rehearsal that he's happy to get another chance to say goodbye to his father.
I look at, right, I agree. I think I look at it not with a kind of like caustic, like, oh, dad again. No, it's more like, hey, this is great.
Okay.
Double blessing, fantastic. Because,
Yeah.
He's going back to France. He's like, hey, occasion smiles upon a second leave. It's all winning. It's all winning for me, baby. I think
Yes, right,
Laertes
exactly.
is feeling really good. And, he just got served by his sister a little bit, but he's like, that's cool with me. I'm about to depart.
I think you're right. I think we forget that Laertes is feeling good, right? He came home, he saw this joyous thing, like the new king said, I'd like Polonius to keep his job, whatever.
Right.
Like everything is still good, and he's going back to France. Like, I think, yeah, Laertes is probably in a good mood. Maybe that, but here my father comes. Maybe those next two lines are Laertes trying to smooth it over with his dad. Like, when your dad's going to get mad at you because you haven't left yet, and you look at your dad and you go, so glad we get to see each other again, Dad. And he goes, no, you need to get on the boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. We finally gotten to the part which I've been waiting 3 episodes for, is to hear Paul Lyons. Paul Lyons talk to us in whichever way he wants to about Polonius. Give us some insight on our friend Polonius here, my friend.
Shall I do it as I read the text, or should I just talk it right now? What do you think?
I would start reading the text, and whenever you want to interrupt yourself,
Okay.
you just do.
Okay. Yet here Laertes aboard for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for there my blessing with thee. And these few precepts in thy memory. I love that. Yes, it's right there, the text. There my blessing with, and the next line is just thee. And so there's an opportunity. I mean, if you rush from there my blessing with thee and these few precepts in thy memory, then you're just reciting this, as opposed to saying, this is something, what did Polonius say to Laertes before? Take care, good luck, be safe. And he's like, but now this is an opportunity. Like, well, hey, now that you're here, it's sort of like us in this episode. We're like, there's so many things I wanted to say. Now I have the opportunity to say them. Great.
Right.
Yeah. My blessing with thee, and these few precepts in thy memory, in my memory, look thou character, which I think in the first folio is see thou character. I've been saying see.
Yep, it is. You're right. It is see thou character in the first folio. What do we have here? We have look thou character. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't think I ever noticed that. Okay, I love it. Hey, you got choices. You got options.
You got choices, and I love that. It's an interesting line. I've always had trouble with it in terms of saying it, because he's basically saying, "I've got some advice for you. Take this down." But it's in the same line as the first bit of advice: "Give thy thoughts no tongue." So. Look thou character, because look thy character is not advice. But maybe, it depends. Since Shakespeare is the king of double, triple, quadruple meanings, maybe look thou character in and of itself, that's advice.
Yes, could be.
And the same thing could be said of see thou character. I never thought about that before, but I always previously thought of see thou character, look thou character as write this shit down. But now it's like, oh, basically saying, hey, look out for yourself.
Yeah, it is. And also it may be all the things I'm about to say are going to reflect your character.
Yes.
So, right, yeah.
So then you could look thou character, give thy thoughts no tongue. Maybe he says that, by the way, because maybe this is stuff Laertes was not doing. He was giving us,
good. Well, he just did to Ophelia.
I know. he's saying, and remember, it's weird too, because Laertes, it's not like he's never been to France before. He's returning to France. He was already there. So it's an odd, but give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his acts. Simple enough. Keep things to your mind. Take a pause before acting. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption try, grapple them into thy soul with hoops of steel. I love that line.
I love that line, Paul, so much, and it's never struck me. It never struck me before. What I get out of it is, if you have friends and they are tried and true, like you have, you've been through it with them, then hold them as close to your heart as you can.
And he's saying that with love, but he's also saying, but be discerning, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged courage. You can't be friends with everybody, buddy.
That's right. Only the ones that are tried and true, the ones that those are the ones, the other ones, like make sure they're worthy of it. Yes.
Yes. And this is very sage advice. He continues, beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, beareth the opposed may beware of thee. Very simple.
I think that's good. I've misread that line. I have to say, in looking and studying this scene now, I'm reading a different interpretation of it, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. I always thought that meant in a quarrel. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting this right. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. I guess I always thought that meant I guess I read that as be aware and not beware, which is two very different things. Be aware, like if you're getting into a quarrel, be very aware of your opponent, very aware of the surroundings. And if you are, he's going to be looking at you the same way. Know that he's looking at you the same way. I always thought it was that way, but it's not, right? What is it? What is that?
I always saw it as, first off, try not to get into a fight. But if you happen to be in a fight, make sure the opposed is afraid of you. Make sure the opposed fears you.
Yes, yeah. Bear that the opposed may beware of. Yeah, and I think that's better. Don't get into a fight, but if you do, kick his ass.
Yeah. And it's a play on words, because it could be, I mean, it's written here as one word, beware, but also could be beware. So it's pretty simple, sage advice. Don't fight. If you do, make sure you kick butt, make sure he fears you, and you can, Laertes is kind of.
Yeah. It's great. It's great dad advice to his son.
Yes. Why didn't he say that the first time around when Laertes tried to leave? Jesus.
That's the other. Yeah, that's coming up. That's the other question. Like, what did they do? Was it just like, bye, son? I'm too emotional to say, just get out of here. And then all of a sudden he sees him again and goes, all right, this is what I wanted to say.
That sounds very Polonius in that he's similar to Hamlet. You and I've talked about this. There's similarities in terms of their witticism and intelligence, and they love their play on words and appreciation thereof. But also the scatterbrain, the appearance of, again, it's a lot about the play's theme of, appearances are not what they seem. Polonius may seem like a fool. I remember in high school, I'll never forget a kid saying, Polonius is a babbling fool. That's before I even read Hamlet. I'm like, who's Polonius? But
little did you know it was your destiny.
I know. But of course, he's not a fool, because nothing he says is foolish.
No. Even later on, the speech that you do so well, is it the expostulate speech?
Yes.
Is comical, but it's not comical because he's dumb. It's comical because he has so many good thoughts, one on top of the other, that leads one to the other. It's not because he's a fool. It's because he's great with words. Because
he and Hamlet have so many thoughts and ideas that sometimes it blinds them to kind of the basic what's in front of them sort of thing. So that's what happens with my liege and madam to expostulate speech. And I think with here, yes, he could be, he's not babbling, he's just loquacious, and it seems like it's never ending, but everything he's saying is like, wow, That is fantastic advice. I should really listen to that.
Yeah, and I think he's not repeating himself. People who babble tend to repeat themselves, tend to go on and on when we've got the point. These are new points every time.
Yes. Also of note, the previous scene was a brother imparting sage advice to a sister. Now this is a father to that same person. So Laertes, after getting schooled by Ophelia, is now getting double schooled by his father, who may be reacting to who Laertes is and actions he had previously done.
Yes, and I think if you're directing this play or if you're acting in this play, these are great opportunities without playwriting, without interrupting the speech, but just a little look that Ophelia can give her brother, like yes, Dad's right about that. Just little things like that that can tell the history that you're talking about right there. Those are opportunities depending upon who the actors are playing the roles.
You asked me the other day, does Polonius take his own advice? Well, again, it's complicated because in this next line, he does not, but it's his job as a father, as a father to a son, a father to a daughter, to give such advice. And also his job is to just talk to the king, be the hand, be his ear, give advice. So it's sort of he willfully does not obey the advice, but of course, he does it in his private life. But none of this is, this is sort of like his. We only see Polonius in duty. We never see him out of duty. He's always the father, the father of a daughter, father of a son, or the king's hand. Or the king's hand talking to Hamlet. He is never by himself, where he could, maybe, who knows, maybe when he goes for a pint, he takes advice and keeps his thoughts to himself, but that's not his job. That's not his job. I think that's interesting. I never thought of that. We never see him not on duty or in his duty. That's a really good point. Yeah. He's so busy with heiresses. He says, give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. He says that for a reason. I love this line. Costly thy habit as they purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy. Rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And then Shakespeare adds on top of that, and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. So
which got a huge laugh in 1603 England.
I know. Those French.
Those French.
What do they know? But
I'm standing in shit.
Exactly. But again, sage advice, none of it's stupid, and very insightful. Polonius knows French, knows the French people, knows they're very good at couture, but they're also very judgmental in of that. So why not? Why not part the
Yes, and I love, but what is it? Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. He's not saying don't talk to people, don't listen to people. He's saying listen to everyone, listen to what they have to say, and don't make a quick judgment or don't give yourself away, which is fine. But he is saying that the beginning of that line is listen to every man.
Yes.
That's great.
Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. But he says, take each man's censure. No, censure, we know what censure is. It's not exactly a great thing. If someone censures you, you're like, damn, why?
Oh, I see what that is. I guess I read that wrong. I was thinking censure meaning like their kind of thoughts, their opinion, their point of view, I thought.
Well, as always, the word censure itself is a punishment. And what it says here in the Folger is censure is synonymous with judgment. So it's
okay.
So yes, so so basically, take your criticism, reserve thy judgment. He said, take each man's censure and reserve thy judgment. So, if someone has an opinion on you, just take it in. Keep cool, because beware of entrance to a quarrel. He just said that before.
Great. Yep. It's great. It's very mature, sound advice. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Cost of that. So then, most productions, I've never seen a production that kept the "and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief," and that they usually cut that line. Yeah. It's a shame. It's only 2 lines. I think it's funny and it's also fun. And then, of course, the iconic "neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend." and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. I mean,
Fantastic.
fantastic. And Shakespeare's like, oh yeah, you think that's great? I got one more that even tops that one.
Oh yeah, I got that's not even the most quotable line in the play, nor the most quotable line in the speech.
I know. It's amazing. I mean, because that's pretty amazing. And then he goes, oh yeah, and it must follow. And then he goes, this above all. So he's like, fuck that other stuff. To thy own self be true, and it must follow as the night, the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing, season this on thee. It's beautiful. It's loving.
It's loving.
You know, and it's interesting that history has picked and chosen from this speech, and kind of separated them, compartmentalized specific lines as without people knowing where it comes from.
Yeah, it's the old joke that two ladies went in and saw Hamlet and they walked out and said, I don't know what the big deal is. It's just full of cliches.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Another guy walked out and said, it's just a lot of talking. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's 4 hours long.
4 hours long, yes. And I timed it. I started my watch and act 1, scene 1, and I stopped it at the end.
What is I love that neither a borrower nor a lender be. It just reminds me of all these stories you hear of people who become rich kind of quickly, whether they're athletes or whether they're entertainers, and they all say the same thing. The hardest thing about having money is learning not to lend it out to family members, because it destroys the relation. It's not so much about not getting the money back, but it destroys that relationship. And you know, Shakespeare was saying it 430 years ago, whatever. What is husbandry? Sorry, I'm not sure I looked at
business. It those the edge
business.
of,
Okay.
Yeah, because you know, obviously,
Gotcha.
if you're lending money all the time, you know, if you're borrowing it, lending, that just messes up your business. You know,
Gotcha.
so
Gotcha.
I think the Folger calls husbandry management of one's money. So yeah, it's kind of relating to that.
Yeah.
My mother, by the way, has been saying since I was a child, when I would say, hey, I lent that kid my toy, he never brought it back. Hey, neither a borrower nor a lender be. It's like before I even knew it was from Hamlet. She
was working on your Polonius subconscious, and it paid off, my friend. It paid off. I think I remember us in rehearsals and maybe even in performance that it was all this good advice. And then when it came down to this above all, to thine own self be true, it became very still and very real and very I to your son, and say, if you don't remember anything else I said, hear your dad in this moment right now. And I just love that. There's a great line in Henry V that I think about and I say to myself all the time when I'm working through something, and it's this story shall the good man teach his son. And that's kind of what it comes down to. If I can just tell you one thing, if I can just teach you one thing, you know what I mean? And I love that moment. I love it.
I love that it's to their own self be true, and it must, and then he could have just ended it there. But he says, and it must follow as the night, the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. So for those who weren't getting it, he goes on. You know,
yes, and the antithesis of true and false.
Yes.
Be true to yourself. You can't be false to anyone else. Great antithesis. Beautiful.
And how could anyone seeing Hamlet or reading the play hear that text from that character and say he's a fool?
No, I don't see it. I think it's low-hanging fruit. I think it's silly. Try to get a laugh. I think it's, I once saw this done this way, so I'm going to do it this way. Yeah, I think it's lazy. I think you got to read it. Look, there are comedic moments for Polonius. Yes, but make sure they're intended to be comedic moments for Polonius, right? I don't see him as a fool. And when he is funny, it's because he is so sharp.
It'd be too sharp for his own good, which is hence the which
is Paul Lyons, ladies and gentlemen, which is Paul Lyons.
That's right.
Some may say he's a fool, but if you really know him, he's only funny because he's too sharp for his own good.
There you go. But yeah, it's well, the shoe fits. No. But yeah, and I think also connects Hamlet to Polonius because they're so wrapped up in their head and their beautiful thoughts and sage wisdom and the way they can see things as a wise sage that they were like, oh no, right in front of me, I got to do some stuff. Whoa, okay, let me think about it some more.
Yes, they're both like that.
They're both. So yeah, and that's why it's so curious when we see the two of them together later on in the play.
There's such opportunity there. I hate it when they're only adversaries. There's opportunity there to see what could have been. And then spoiler alert, when one kills the other one, there should be a moment of Hamlet. There should be a moment of regret. There shouldn't be a moment of, oh, he was my adversary the whole time anyways. No, I think there was possibility for these two somewhere, but it just never happened and it got off track. Yeah.
Well, another thing of note, just granted, we'll talk about it later on in the play, but in line with regret, it's a big deal to Hamlet that he's killed someone. It's the first kill of the play.
Oh, yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, right.
That's the first kill.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my God, I've killed the man. That's kind of huge. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so killing Claudius, the king,
Right.
Yeah,
You're right. Finally, when Hamlet decides to take action, it kills the wrong man. Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So Laertes says, most humbly do I take my leave, my lord. Again, that sounds sincere to me. That sounds
Absolutely.
like all that speech before, it sounded like it landed. It sounded like that speech, or at least the end of it, hit its target.
Right, because Laertes gives him no other lip other than thanks. And
great.
If the actor chooses to not listen to Polonius, say, yeah, he goes, yeah, most humbly do I take my leave, my lord, and splits. So like, okay, well, then you're just ignoring the play. You're doing your own Hamlet, which my guess is far less interesting than what Shakespeare.
Yes, it's taking the heart out of it. Hey, what do you have for this next line? Because I've seen a couple of different versions of this next line.
First folio, I think, has invites that I use. Folger has invests. The time invests you, which I don't like as much.
I don't either. What does that mean? The time mean time is waiting on you. It's invested in you, kind of thing.
It's like it. Well, the time invests. I don't know. I know invites is that
I like
the ship's
invites.
waiting. You're invests you is more of an active action. Invests you. So maybe it depends on the word invests. Well, Folger says vest meaning presses upon. So
I don't know. I like invites.
Yeah, as well. I like it better. That's why I choose it when I did it. I did invites, not invests.
Yeah, but isn't it great that you get a choice? Isn't that kind of cool? I know. Sometimes in this play, you get a choice to kind of
just like Mamet, just like David Mamet, you get a choice of how to do it with Mamet. You get to anyway.
Sure you do. And then Laertes kind of, I don't know if he kind of blows it here. Like they had this little secret and then he kind of says it out loud, but maybe it's just Polonius very good at being very aware of his children. But he turns to Ophelia and says, farewell, Ophelia, and remember well what I have said to you, apparently in earshot of Polonius.
Yes. And by the way, a mistake that everyone makes is that no one takes into the gravity of Laertes' concern. He's so concerned about this particular point that even after getting schooled by Polonius, he's like, he hasn't forgotten. He's like, Ophelia, goodbye, but also remember what I told you, because that's important.
He goes back to that.
And
good point.
He feels it's important. That cannot be, underestimated. It's an important line. And of course, giving further ammunition to Polonius, of course.
Yes, right. So then she says, of course, they're both talking in earshot of their father, so they don't seem to be trying to hide this from Dad.
No.
he just picks up on it because we're going to find out later that he's been told by someone that they've been spending time together. 'Tis in my memory locked, and you yourself shall keep the key of it. Beautiful. What a lovely line.
Said with love, and I'll add innocence, because it doesn't occur to her that she's going to be browbeaten by her father over the next scene.
That's right.
But,
That's good. That's a good point. Innocence and love. The more I look at this scene, the more I think about families in this play and the breakdown of families. I think it's a good opportunity before Polonius killed, before Ophelia commits suicide, before Laertes, to show a strong family unit as much as you can in this scene. And whenever you can choose love, especially in this scene, choose love in the scene rather than eye roll and exhaustion and can't wait to get out of here, or whatever else choices we've seen, which I don't agree with. And I think what you just said, or anger. And I think those two lines, like you said, farewell, Ophelia, remember well what I've said, 'tis in my memory locked, and you yourself to keep. It can be a very sweet, loving, innocent moment. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So farewell.
But
no, people.
Polonius has to ruin it.
No, he has to. Well, Laertes leaves, and I will say, maybe not in this entire play, but in a lot of it, it's best when there's three people, right? When it was Laertes, Polonius, and Ophelia, it was nice, and it was three. When it was just the two of them, one's getting lectured, just the two of them, one's getting lectured. So Laertes leaves, and take it away, Paul. Where do we go from there?
What is Ophelia he has said to you? So he's like, the love of my life is gone. My son, who I adore, now I'm going to deal with this problem I have, my daughter. It's a shame, but given the time and the place, you got to really squeeze the tough love out of Polonius for his daughter, which is a very different kind of love that he has for his son. Sun, the moon, the stars, he gets advice. Polonius, he just kind of, wields a big stick, per se.
Yes, right. So please you something touching the Lord Hamlet. So she, listen, I mean, he says, what did he say to you? And she doesn't, she's not afraid of her father. People who want to think there's some kind of bad history there, I don't see it, because she says it was just something about Hamlet. She doesn't spill a, she just says something touching the Lord Hamlet. And then he knows, because he's heard, because he has information.
I think it's because she's afraid of her father that she reveals that much.
You think so? Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She went from
people do want to build in a bit of history there between the two. I mean, I always thought, a director once said, and I think of it all the time, keep it as light as long as possible. Don't go dark or dramatic or fear anything until the last possible moment that you can. So if she's light there and saying, so please you something touching the Lord Hamlet, just something about Hamlet, Dad, that's all. And then he goes, well I
like that better.
Here's the problem.
I like that better. My only question is the history of Polonius and Ophelia. What is their relationship? I think yes, I love the thought of Ophelia being almost coquettish about it, something touching the Lord Hamlet, but does she know her audience? And I love also, there's a play on words there, something touching Lord Hamlet.
That's funny.
That's
pretty good.
We got something going on there. And so when Polonius speaks with her, is she surprised at his? Maybe not, because if you're Ophelia playing this, you just got schooled by your brother about, and just reminded again, remember, Hamlet no good. And then as the actress, you now have your father saying the same thing, but in a much harsher and more explicit tone.
Right. Yeah. So the big questions that come up now are, when was this relationship with Hamlet? When was all of this happening? Who told Polonius? Which I guess that's that the specificity of that isn't all that important to the audience. He has ears and eyes kind of everywhere. But when was this relationship happening? And Ophelia must not think that Polonius knows about it, because then he's going to say later, I have heard. And I guess it's better for Ophelia to be new information for Ophelia. So
yes,
when did Ophelia and Hamlet? It must be
recent,
before he went off to school. How long has he been at Wittenberg?
Well, I want to say that I almost want to say, I have a feeling that they knew each other, of course, but that strangely enough, when he came back to Denmark, the funeral of his father, the marriage of his mother, he somehow was doing double duty of being miserable and at the same time, paying call to Miss Ophelia. Because it cannot be that Hamlet was away for months, and this, it feels from the text, it feels like he just saw her earlier, maybe that morning or the day before.
Yeah, I think you're right. Later, we're going to have to justify where the letters came from, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Polonius reads one, maybe two. Ophelia goes to give some things back, and we have to wonder, were those from a year ago or those from a month ago? It's something, again, for the actors to discuss and come up with. I don't know. I don't know.
It's another case of, right. It's just the questions, continuing asking those questions and leading to the exploration that will just feed you as an actor portraying any of the characters, obviously. But right, it could have been that they had a relationship before he went to Wittenberg. They exchanged, the letters were from Wittenberg. It could be a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that he wrote those letters from school. Oh, that's great. I think that's really nice. I like that. It'd be a reason why he would write letters rather than just say, hey, let's sneak off to the East Wing. That's where all the good stuff goes down in the East Wing.
Well, that's a great sitcom title. Let's sneak off to the East Wing.
Says Hamlet to Ophelia. Okay.
Yes. And so when Ophelia says, so please use something touching the Lord Hamlet, Polonius, ready to strike, baby.
Yes.
Very well be thought. 'Tis told me he hath very oft of late given private time to you, and you yourself have of your audience been most free and bounteous. So, as it so 'tis put on me, and that in a way of caution, I must tell you, you do not understand yourself so clearly, and it behooves my daughter and your honor. What is between you? Give me up the truth. So it's like, I am now, I am the judge, and come clean. Yeah, come clean, girlfriend, right now. Like, again, urgency. The urgency.
Yes.
That is the key to all of Hamlet. It's the now. The time invites you. Go. Your servants tend. The urgency of now. What is, I must know now your relationship with Hamlet. Why now? Because it has to be now. The now is extremely important for a play that actually, is haunted by the past, but the present, very important.
Oh, that's great, Paul. That's right. A play that's haunted by the past, but the urgency of now is where it lives. So he says, given private time of you. Oh no, sorry. 'Tis told me he hath very oft of late. So at least we know since he's been back.
Yeah.
So that the relationship may have started, letters may have come from school, but since he's been back, you guys have been spending time together. And someone told me that because Polonius is part of his job to know everything that's going on. He's very good at it. And it's not a sneaky thing. It's part of his job.
Yeah.
It's what makes him so valuable. It's why the new king took over and said, I still want that guy as my right-hand man.
He knows his stuff.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. I must tell you, do not understand yourself so clearly as it behoves my daughter and your honor. And then he gets right to it. What is between you? He gets right to it. By the end of that speech, he just gets right to it and says, tell me what is going on between you two. He hath,
Yes.
my Lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me. Great. So she's saying, look, he likes me. He might be in love with me, and he's telling me about it, giving me gifts. She says it in a very sweet way too, right? So she's trying to say it's a very sweet thing.
And she's also guarding her heart, because she doesn't say, I love him, my father. She's saying, in a dignified manner, he hath, my Lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me. It's like very formal, wonderfully formal, but also you could sense that she's covering her heart, that she's covering her true,
Yes. And what's great is she's trying to do a little bit of, not wordplay, but she's trying to pick the right words in front of a person who does it better than maybe anyone else in the play, right? Maybe only Hamlet does it better, and he pounces.
Oh, yeah. Particularly her use of the word tenders.
Oh, so first he throws affection back in her face, and then tenders it's so good. He cannot help himself. He's so good. So she's trying to choose the best words in front of a person who chooses the best words better than anybody.
Oh, yeah. And knows how to play with the words.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Affection, Pooh, you speak like a green girl, unsifted in such perilous circumstance. Do you believe his tenders, as you call them?
So good. Another question, another real question that he wants a real answer. And I do not know, my Lord, what I should think. Now, maybe that's because of the pressure of Polonius in her face, or maybe that's true. Maybe she's hung out with him and she is a young green girl and truly doesn't know what to think. I don't know what that line is. Or maybe she knew what to think until she's being pressured by her father. Now she's like, well, now I don't know. I don't know what to think. I don't know what answer you want.
Yeah, because he's speaking specifically of belief. And with the spotlight at 1,000 degrees on her face, she's like, I don't know what to believe at this point,
Yeah, right.
Because nothing makes sense when you have that kind of pressure on you.
Well, and to someone like Polonius to say, I don't know what to think, is the wrong thing to say, because he'll say, I'll tell you what to think. He's so good. He's so good.
And he is so explicit. Mary, I will teach you. Think yourself a baby that you have taken these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling. Making it very clear, this is, again, not what it's seeming to be. He's giving you something, but it's not what you think it is. Kind of the theme of the play. Tender yourself more dearly, or not to crack the wind of the poor phrase, running it thus, you'll tender me a fool, which is only until recently that I learned this, the triple meaning of tender meaning you'll birth me a child. You'll birth me
tender me a. Oh, I didn't know that. You'll tender me a fool. It's not make me look like a fool. It
is that too.
Oh, by birthing. Oh, I didn't know that.
It's everything. Oh. It's triple. It's like you'll tender me a fool. You make me look like a fool, and it also could mean you'll give me, this child out of wedlock, this blemished grandchild.
Wow. Here's the thing I love about Polonius. In the middle of this execution of words, which is so good, in the middle of throwing the word tender back at her, twisting it, turning it, he cannot help himself but to have an aside to say, not to crack the wind of the poor phrase. He's aware that he's maybe overusing it. I mean, come on, fantastic.
That's the beauty of a man whose mind is so filled with thoughts and words and ideas that he is willing to distract himself from his own points to say, well, I probably could word that a little better. I've overused the word, but but since it's there, I'm going to say it. You'll tender me a fool.
That reminds me of my friend Paul Lyons, who I believe I think if you were giving a eulogy at someone's funeral and you had a chance to double entendre something, you could not help your own mind. You could not help an aside that would say, or if something came up and you could quote Polonius. That reminds me so much of you, how quick your mind works and how you don't want to let that opportunity go. Yeah, and how aware you are and how You want to make sure everyone knows that you know that I'm aware of what I'm doing. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's an oddly self-conscious moment for someone who otherwise is not particularly self-conscious.
Yeah. In the middle, like right in the throes of really telling Ophelia, making his point. I love that there's an aside of, I know I'm using this phrase too much, but I'm making a point. Fantastic.
And I think I love when screenwriters and playwrights do that, because it makes the character more human. It kind of opens up a little window into, a little bit of self-consciousness. Like, even if someone is killing you, like, I could be better at killing. Like, what? I'm still going to kill you, but right. I'm also opening a window into my own insecurity. So I love little windows like that.
I think that's beautiful. I think it's great. It's like being in an argument with someone and really being mad at them, and then losing your train of thought for a second, and then getting mad at yourself for losing your train of thought. Like, we don't see that enough. It's great. And like in film and art, it's great.
It's vulnerability. It's vulnerability. And you certainly don't expect vulnerability at a time of anger, or a time of pressure or stress or what have you. And he's giving up. He's giving her that, he's giving, and the audience that as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
I love that.
So she says, "My lord, he hath importuned me with love in honorable fashion." Okay, so she's trying to say he's being honored. The way he's doing it is honorable.
What's interesting is that Shakespeare chooses to, Polonius interrupts her, but it doesn't do it an interruption of the meter, in honorable fashion, and then he responds, not interrupting her, even though it looks like an interrupted line. I fashion, you may call it, go to.
Although, Paul, I think, wait a minute. Did we shift to prose? I'm just trying to figure this out.
Possibly for the exchange.
Right, that we went from,
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't consider that. You're right.
When he's turning to Ophelia, maybe it shifted, maybe not. No, because that speech is still
in honorable fashion. So we've got 7 beats. There's 3 left, but yet it seems like he interrupts her.
Yeah, this stuff feels like prose to me. I springes to catch woodcocks. I do. Oh, that's 10. I don't know. Yeah.
I think he switches back. I think the soliloquy is in verse, but I think
you mean the monologue. The monologue isn't. Yeah.
Yes.
Mary, what was that told me here? Have of your audience been most free and bounteous? Yeah, that's got to be prose. That's a whole nother discussion of when and why it goes from prose to verse and all that stuff. But okay, you're right.
It goes from essentially the domestic to something more, this is for all, as he says. And then Ophelia backs it up, and hath given countenance to his speech, my lord, with almost all the holy vows of heaven. Now she's really she's making it so much worse for herself.
Right. So he turns, just to go back a bit, he turns the word fashion. So now he's turned he's picked up on the word affection. He picked up on the word tender. And now he's picked up on the word fashion from her. Like he's so good at this. In honorable fashion, fashion, you may call it. Does that mean fashion? In other words, like here one day, gone the next, fashion, that kind of quick. So that he's saying, you can call it fashion because it's not going to last.
And he encourages to continue, and then she just digs herself deeper in the mud. And that gives countenance to his speech, my lord, with almost all the holy vows of heaven. Well, that's a bold statement.
Wow. I mean, she's going in. Now, did you say, what do you make of go to? Do you think that means go on, or go to mean? Yeah, because he hasn't really said. I am confused by that go to, because
I always took it as go on. I've always taken it as that. That could be wrong. That's the way I've always read it and played it.
Yeah, I think that's right, because he still wants the information, and he still hasn't said what he needs to say to her, which is, from this point forward, no more, right? So go to. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I read somewhere that it was like it was a dismissive thing, and then she tries to plead her point. She's the one who continues the conversation, but yeah, I guess not.
Actor,
I like,
with that in mind, it is an opportunity there, because, and I think maybe when I played it, I unconsciously thought of it, because I'm thinking about it now. Polonius is enjoying this a little bit. He loves hearing his offspring try to give these excuses, like, what?
Right.
Show me what else you got. Oh, really? I mean, he's kind of reveling in it, like, with almost all the holy vows of heaven.
He has an answer for everything she says. So he's saying, go again, try again, tell me how great it is, and I'm going to tell you why it's not. Go ahead, give me another one, and I'll tell you again. Yeah.
And he gives this speech. It's one of my favorites in the entire play, and I repeat it constantly to myself, and I think about it often. Which again, it's not a soliloquy because it's shorter, or because
it's because he's not the only person on stage by himself.
Oh, yeah, gotta remember that.
The soliloquy is only by themselves talking to the audience. Yeah,
but it's a great speech where he says this great line: "I springes to catch woodcocks, I do know. When the blood burns, how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows." I love it, and it's so true. Particularly if you're a man or woman, it happens.
Oh, it does.
I'm sadly very guilty of that. So I take that to heart, and I say that to myself, either out loud or to myself silently, when I'm in precarious situations.
Yes, of course. Yes, it's so on the nose. It's so good. Another, if I could point out, maybe I'm stretching here, but another antithesis of holy vows of heavens to springes to catch woodcocks. Like there's a difference in.
Yes. Oh, right? Absolutely. Right. It's funny. I didn't even think about that. Right.
But she goes high and he goes low.
He goes low.
What he's doing is. Yeah, she's saying what he's doing is, vows of heaven. He goes, no, what he's doing is trapping you, like, to catch woodcocks.
Yes, strangers to catch woodcocks, I do know. When the blood burns, how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows. These blazes, daughter, giving more light than heat, extinct in both, even in their promise, as it is a making, you must not mistake for fire. I mean,
oh my goodness.
Must not. And it's amazing, because again, back to the theme, things appearing not what they seem, continuing with that theme,
who's there?
Exactly. Who's there? It's so strong, it's like saying, it's back to what he said before, think yourself a baby that you have taken these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling. He's saying the same thing here, when the blood burns, how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows. These blazes, right, daughter, give you more light than heat, extinct in both, even in the promise, as it is a making, you must not take for fire, because it's not.
God, because it's not. I love that. Blazes. So you see him as blazes. There's more light. There's not giving off heat, and then he goes extinct in both. Like,
yes,
he's just cranking it up, and it's so good.
He knows, because he was a young man himself. He was like that. Right. He knows his son. He knows the ways of men. So he says, bullshit, and this is another line I've quoted to women. I've ashamedly said so out loud. Set your entreatments to a higher rates than a command to parley. Be something, from this time, be something scanter of your maiden presence. Set your entreatments at a higher rate than a command to parley. I've quoted that to women who are having problems with guys or taking it for granted. Whatever, say what you want. I'll take your punishment. But
no, great.
It's such sage advice. Set your treatment to a higher rate than a command to parley. Why do you got to talk? Why do you got to give yourself to everybody?
Right. Right.
Be more realistic in your choices. Yes. Be something scanter. Make yourself. I mean, it's these are similar to the lessons that he imparts to Laertes. It's just, he's doing the same thing with his daughter. Just the tone is quite different. Sure. The language far harsher.
Yeah, listen, and I would like to think it's not because he's a bad person. It's not because he's an abusive father. It's because for a female, there's more at stake in 1603 in his mind, possibly.
Yeah.
That's where I'd like to at least start from in the rehearsal process.
Particularly at that age that she's at.
Yes. Yes.
You know.
So the message has to be clear and maybe a little more harsh. It's like when Lucas rides his bike without a helmet, I'm like, hey kid, wear a helmet. And then he runs out into traffic and I yell at him, don't you ever run out into traffic. The stakes are a little higher and you have to be a little more harsh and a little clearer. And I think maybe if I'm in rehearsal, I'm starting there. Polonius's motivation is that there's more at stake for his daughter than his son. Maybe.
Yeah. And I think that stake is justified by the text head on. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, your maiden presence, she is clearly a virgin, at least I hope so. Mm-hmm. She is young, a young woman in society, particularly society that oppresses women. You got to be extra careful of men who will use and abuse you. You know, it's sage advice then, right. It's sage advice now. As Glenda Jackson says, Shakespeare is the most contemporary playwright alive today. He is.
It's true, my friend. It's so true. Yeah. Okay, keep it going.
For Lord Hamlet, believe so much in him that he is young, and which is a line, always curious line for me. Believe so much in him that he is young, which means, what does it mean?
I don't know. It feels to me like your belief in him, what you believe is true about him, goes only as far as his age. That's it. Just believe that he's young. These things are because he's young. Don't believe anything more than that.
Yes,
maybe
that. You know, it could also mean, you know, believe so much in him that, well, I guess it's akin to that his romantic hubris is in relation to his youth, which again, how old is Hamlet? He's 30. How old is Laertes? What is he, 40? Is he also 30? What's going on here?
It's tough to wrangle with that. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to wrangle with that, but I think we have to play this as the text kind of wants us to play it. Yeah,
exactly. And I love this part. And with a larger tether may he walk than may be given you. Of course, for a number of reasons, he's a man. He's also royalty. He's got a much longer leash. In few, Ophelia, do not believe his vows, for they are brokers, not of that dye which their investments show, but mere implorators of unholy suits, breathing like sanctified and pious bonds. Or in this case, it says bawds. I've been using bonds. Bonds
I think bonds makes more sense.
But bawds has a lovely double meaning. Something that's bawdy is obviously a little bit, on the low end. Breathing light, good. Sanctified and pious bonds, bawds, the better to beguile. So for the actor, if I was directing Hamlet, you got to drive that straight through. Otherwise, the message is not clear. You don't rush it, but it's there's an urgency to it.
Yes, there it is. Yeah,
it's right there. But I love he says, not of that dye which they are invested show. He's saying the same thing. It's things are not what they seem. He's right. Blood burns, how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows. Investments not of that dye for which their investments show. It's a number. It's a game. He's pulling a card trick on you. It's certainly very rude to Hamlet. Speaks nothing of.
Well, I also think a bit of what Laertes says is that Hamlet may believe what he's saying now, but he's young, right? He may believe it. He's not trying to trick you. That's just what young men do.
Right. So, definitely pointing to youth as the adversary and their relationship. Not to mention, of course, Hamlet's station, which then I won't mention it then. The better to beguile, deceive. This is for all I would then, he goes, I would not in plain terms from this time forth have you so slandered any moment leisure as to give words or talk with the Lord Hamlet. Look to it, I charge you, come your ways. I mean, now the question is, did he make that the decision on the line? Or did he come in? At what point? I mean, my guess is, and I think the way to play it, yes.
Yeah. Well, yes, on the line. Yeah, I think that's where you have to start. I think you have to start in rehearsals and start thinking about making these decisions as in the moment as possible. I love that. I love him coming in and just saying, wait a minute, what did Laertes say to you? You know, I've heard people tell me lately, and then he lets her say a couple things like, it's, you know, he's been doing it, you know, with affection, the holy vows of heaven. And I think he has to amp and ramp everything up until he goes, all right, this is for all. Now you're going to hear my verdict here, which I love. This is for all mirrors this above all that he says to Laertes. Yeah. So I think your instinct is right. In the moment, make that decision because you've gotten fired up.
It's not only is it the best way to play it, but I think it's the most truthful way to play it in terms of the text. Because
listen, it's like I say later, which I always say, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That Hamlet says to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And I remember it dawning on me the second time I played it was that I need to play that line as if that's not a line that Hamlet would have said before his father died. Before his father died, Hamlet was a thinker, and Hamlet could put things in categories of good and bad. In that very moment, he looks at RNG and he just says, you know, what's dawning on me in this moment is that it's all in how we think about things. The world is different to me now. And just like you're saying, if you can play it on the line, discover it in that moment, I think that's going to be more urgent and have more life to it.
Yes, because Polonius is kind of revving himself up for that line. Everything he's saying, the entire monologue is revving himself to come to the conclusion of this above all. You know, I would not have you from this time forth have useless slander anymore. You know, it's a conclusion based on the urgency and his discovery on his own line. You know, on the line of his judgments, his observation is what his job is. So he's like, now that I think about it a lot and say it out loud, I have nothing to do with this guy. I don't care if his father died. I don't care if his mom married his uncle. My daughter, no, she's out.
Yeah, I think so. Look to it, I charge you, come your ways. And I mentioned earlier about the last line in one scene butting right up against the first line in the next scene. And this is one of those great moments where maybe Ophelia, when I directed it the first time, I left Ophelia on stage. I shall obey my lord. And Hamlet came walking right in. And for a moment, it was just Ophelia and Hamlet before she said, I shall obey my lord. And then she exited. And then the other guys came on and started the scene. And he immediately said, the air bites shrewdly. It's very cold. The weather cold, but she is now going to be cold toward him. All that kind of stuff kind of played together. If you put those two lines together, there's more possibilities. There's more storytelling.
Absolutely. And a note to the actress playing Ophelia, of course, you really got to take in each punch that Polonius has to you. So by the time you get to, I shall obey my lord, the full impact of what this is going to mean. And not only in terms of the impact of your father issuing a fateful command, or at least what feels like a very permanent command, but also the command itself and who the command is about, you know? And so that has got to land in a very profound way. I mean, it's got to hit you like you'd be almost stunned.
I think you're right. And I think you get more mileage out of that if at the beginning, you're not quite afraid. Like you're just kind of saying, hey, it was something touching the Lord Hamlet. No, it's fine. It's his affections. You know what I mean? It's the fashion of his affections and all these things. And you're kind of taken back by this. So I think that the shock of it is more if that first line from Ophelia is not quite so shocked, I guess is what I'm saying. If you get here, you know what I mean?
Right. It's a more interesting journey for Ophelia to
Yeah.
go from, as opposed to just A to A.
Another thing when we talk about how Shakespeare wasn't concerned about time, he wasn't concerned about, travel time. He wasn't concerned about those things. I think another thing he's not really concerned about, and you wouldn't be in the theater of 1603, is what room this is taking place in. Nowadays we love to look at modern play. Okay, what room? Am I in the bedroom? Am I in the living room? Are we in the backyard? Really let that inform you. I guess I would think when I first started reading this, okay, where are we? What room? It doesn't matter. That's not the point.
Does not matter.
The point is not what room we're in. The point is what's going
Yeah.
on with the family. I love that.
Yeah.
There's another thing that they never mention. I think maybe the actors if I was directing this, I would ask these three actors, get together. You don't have to tell me. You don't ever have to tell me, but I want the three of you to talk about where's mom, what happened to mom, that. But you don't ever have to tell me, but I want you guys to discuss it and you guys have something in your mind. It's never brought up. It's never discussed. We never hear of mom, see mom, the other female relationship in Polonius's life. He had 2 children with someone, maybe 2 different women. I don't know, but it informed him somehow. But again, Shakespeare doesn't address it. He doesn't need to address it.
Well, I'd almost want to say, in a strange bit of irony, given the time the play was written and the perception on women, perhaps the attitude was, who cares about the mother? Women can't be trusted. And, obviously it's not that important who the mother is. I mean, it's got the father. That's the big thing. That's what the play is about. It's about fathers, not about moms. I mean, yes, there's a Gertrude and Hamlet and a little bit of questioning there, but, Gertrude's not exactly, portrayed as a great broad, in the best way of the world. So it's, I think
that's a good point. I don't think the original audience, it crossed their mind. I don't think it crossed their mind as, hey, where's Ophelia's mom? I don't think modern audiences even question it. I bet modern audiences watch it. They don't even think about it.
No one thinks about Fortinbras's mom. Never.
Right. I just don't think people do. That's why if the 3 actors want to discuss it so they're on the same page, I would encourage that. But don't tell me, don't tell the other cast. You guys just figure it out for yourself because it's your history, and we don't need to know, right? We know, we get the important information. We know what we need to know, and the rest we don't need to worry about it. What room is this taking place in? Who cares? Doesn't matter. Maybe it's outside. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right?
It could be in an elevator. It could be a janitor's closet.
I mean, the old Hamlet in the elevator production was really interesting.
Very good, particularly the 3rd floor. When they got to the 3rd floor, it got very interesting.
Yeah, you should have seen the sword fight.
Weird. Oh boy. Yeah, they had to practice
really
that.
strange.
Yeah, a lot of people died doing the elevator production, needless to say. It's an interesting scene because, comparatively speaking, it's pretty brisk, and it's domestic. Hamlet's not in it. He's spoken of,
right.
And it's the only, as far as I know, I mean, outside of the soliloquies, Claudius's soliloquy, that we have a non-Hamlet scene. A scene that, that is not specific. I mean, it's part of the plot. I mean, right? You have you have scenes with Polonius and Claudius, and we have Polonius with Gertrude. But this scene, in and of itself, family, really about.
I think it is because I think it has to be about that because, I mean, let's be honest. You could cut this scene from the play, and you wouldn't lose anything. The reason being is because later on, all this information is repeated when Polonius takes Ophelia to the king and says, I told my daughter to stay away from Hamlet, and that's why he's going crazy. He repeats that information. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why is it in here? We know from the previous scene that Laertes is going back to school. So that's not what it's for, right? We know all the other stuff gets repeated. It's got to be to show that family unit. Also, yes, I can always say a good reason to keep a scene is because it's written beautifully and because we want to hear these words. But as far as plot goes, you could cut it out. I mean, you could cut out advice to the players, but no one ever does because it's written so well and it's a joke on the theater. You could cut out to be or not to be, and everything would probably move much smoother and the play would, but you're never going to cut that out because of how beautiful a speech that is.
I mean, you can cut the entire play and then just, have a ham sandwich instead. You're like, hey, Hamlet, I heard Hamlet's great. Save yourself a whole lot of time. No 4 hours for you. But I think the other notion of the scene is that it informs the audience who these people are, people who end up having important segments in the play later on. And if you don't have this scene, you don't know anybody. So Polonius is just a one-dimensional character. Laertes, ditto, even though he doesn't appear until much later in the play. And Ophelia too, very vastly underwritten character. It adds the dimension you need to appreciate when they all die. Spoiler alert,
Right.
Because
you're right. The person that they're talking about, this whole scene is the one who's going to lead all of them pretty much to their death.
Oh yeah. I mean, and yet their death will have very little meaning if we don't see them as a family.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And so I think going back to your point, this is a long way to just agree with you, is that this scene has to be about family.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think so.
And it's tricky in that sense because it seems relatively simple, and a lot of directors would mistake it so and cast it off as opposed to the importance of it.
Right. They try to get laughs out of it or try to underplay it or something. But I think you're right. You set up this strong family, and then the love for each other, then the stuff that happens later makes sense and fueled. And of course, we don't know in the moment, but it's the last time Laertes and Polonius get to see each other. So, even if the audience doesn't know what's coming, you make that count. So when Laertes comes back and yells, "Where is this king?" and puts a knife to the king's throat, we think back to when we saw them two together.
So we know that Laertes is not just this, bloodthirsty, revenge-filled person, that he's also a loving brother,
right?
Yeah, a thoughtful son, and he actually is smart, has some pearls of wisdom.
Yes, absolutely. I think so. And to see how Ophelia is with her brother, I think we need to see that. We need to see those things. How she is. It tells us something about her character too. Absolutely. I think it's a great scene. It should not be overlooked. And then, not to get too far ahead, but after "I shall obey, my lord," there is a huge time jump. But we are still in day one. We are still when Michael Pennington calls day one. There's a huge time jump. So if this all happened in the morning, the boat left in the morning, maybe an hour after the previous scene, we're talking still before noon. And then next time we see Hamlet, they talk about how it has struck, did the hour strike? What hour now? I think it lacks 12. No, it has struck. So it probably jumps 12 hours is our time jump, but still possibly the same day.
It's a great sort of, it's the way film is structured. You set up a plot point, you cut away to something else, and then we're back to this story within a story of Hamlet being introduced to the ghost of his father, which beginning of the scene with "Who's there?" So right. It's a nice sort of like, if the play ended for some strange reason, ended right there, you're like, hey, there's some good stuff in here. But then he's like, oh no, we right. Still got the ghost to contend with. You don't know. Oh yeah, coming.
That's because I guess you could say, we're talking about inciting incidents. We're talking about murder of King Hamlet, marriage. But the big third one is the ghost asking Hamlet to avenge his murder. Hasn't happened yet. That big plot point, that big inciting incident hasn't even dropped yet. And
And
so much has happened.
right, so much has happened already that the play could be just this.
Yes.
Like,
Right.
Hamlet's like, what? You don't want to see me? I'm not happy about that. You know, doesn't
Right.
see the ghost, is kind of moping around, and and we have still like, I'm still mad about my uncle with the king. I mean, that's my father. That's
Yeah.
already played. And then Shakespeare's like, oh no,
Oh yeah.
don't forget, I introduced this ghost thing. I haven't forgotten. Here we go.
That's right. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, that's great. I remember in the times I've played Hamlet, the time between foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes, to the air bites shrewdly, it is very cold, which is this scene, right? You get a little bit of a break. It goes by way fast. You think like, oh, I got a little bit of a break. You go backstage for a second. You go, oh, I better get back on. Like you just have no time. You don't really have any time until one of your favorite lines is when Claudius sends you off to England and you can go off. And then if you do the seventh soliloquy, if you do how all occasions inform against me, which I got to do the second time, you do that speech. From this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth. The next thing you think in your head is, oh, good, I got about a 25-minute break. you get a little breather there before you have to come back on and do a sword fight. It's great. But right here, playing the actor playing Hamlet, take this couple of minutes, take a breath, get yourself ready, because the next scene is emotional. The next scene takes everything you have, and it is the launching pad for the rest of the play.
I thought Shakespeare originally meant that during the break between that the actor playing we should be looking at his phone, checking for messages.
Yeah. If you can do an Instagram live, that would be the time to do it. I'm pretty
I'm
sure.
in the middle of Hamlet right now. I hope it's going well. Oh, it's my next line. Oh shoot, I forgot. This is going to be interesting.
Oh, geez.
That must have happened. It must have happened.
Oh, God, it must.
Just in the excitement of it all. But wow, and it's amazing. We've had some very interesting discussions so far, and yet we've just begun.
Yes,
we've only great. Just begun, as someone once wrote.
Yeah, sounds familiar. This is great, Paul. Thank you for taking the lead on that scene. Really, really great stuff.
Thank you. I do enjoy that scene, and I'm looking forward to, as we continue on. Is there anything else that happens in this play? My guess is no.
I mean, so much as that. There's no way. There's no way the writer.
What else could you add to that? I mean, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night, the day. I mean, the end. That's how I would end it.
That's got to be the most famous speech in this play. I'm guessing. There's
and
no other
high
speech.
Note, I say. Anybody remember the last speech? No. So just end right there. Quit while you're ahead.
End right there. Oh, God. All right, my friend. Thank you. And we will talk soon.
Absolutely. Talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, buddy.